My parents treated me like a tenant and threw me out while I was 7 months pregnant, so I answered their cruelty with a decision they'll never escape. My parents kicked me out while I was 7 months pregnant for not paying rent. Now they want to meet my son after everything they did to me. I'm a 28-year-old female, and I recently gave birth to my son about 2 months ago. I've been living with a friend in her apartment. It's pretty cramped here, but it's a better living arrangement than my parents' house. I'm a single mom. My ex-boyfriend is the father of my child, but when I told him I wanted to keep the baby, I gave him the choice to walk away, and he chose to do so. He doesn't want to be a part of the child's life. I did demand child support, but the payments only started coming in once our son was born. The terms of our agreement stated that he'd only be obligated to pay child support after the child was born and until he turned 18, and only after paternity had been established. He and I have no other contact apart from him sending the amount we'd agreed upon every month. I'm a freelance photographer, so there was no way I could go back to work after the 5th month because there were quite a few complications, and I had to depend on my savings. I moved out of my rented apartment and asked my parents if I could live with them until my son was born. My parents and I don't really have a great relationship because they don't like my choice of career, but they agreed to let me live with them since I was pregnant. They didn't discuss anything about rent with me, so I assumed I'd be living there for free, which was a far more preferable alternative than having to spend my money on rent every month when I wasn't working. I lived with them for the first 2 months without any problems, and it was actually quite pleasant. I did contribute in my own little way by paying for groceries since I was the one consuming the most in that house and also contributing to the water and electric bills. It wasn't a lot, but I was trying not to be a freeloader. Even that wasn't enough. In the first week of my 7th month, my parents told me that they didn't want to bring this up with me because it was embarrassing, but they needed me to pay rent. I was a little taken aback because they hadn't talked about that when I first asked if I could move in with them. I thought the whole point of me living with them was that I wouldn't have to pay rent. They'd assumed I was going to pay to live with them, and it hadn't even occurred to them that I might want to live there for free because I was pregnant and out of work. They thought I was eventually going to pay and didn't want to talk to me about it because it seemed tacky to discuss money. I told them that the only reason I'd moved back in with them was because I couldn't afford to pay rent right now without burning through my savings. I needed to save money because my pregnancy wasn't going to be an easy one, so in case of any future medical emergencies, I needed to know I could depend on my savings. Even though I did have medical insurance, it never hurt to be doubly safe, which is why I was being a little too financially conscious. I could understand that they obviously didn't want a freeloader in the house, so I told them that once my son was born and I went back to work, I'd pay them the entire amount in one go, whatever I owed them. They just needed to let me live with them for free until I went back to work and could afford to pay the rent money. This was a negotiation I couldn't have with other landlords, but since these were my own parents, I expected them to be a little lenient. I definitely intended to pay them as soon as I could afford to. I'm not a thief. My parents were skeptical, and after some deliberation, they told me they couldn't just let me live there for free. If I wanted to live with them, I needed to pay rent, or I'd have to leave. It felt terrible that my own parents were kicking me out over something like this. I tried to reason with them. I even told them I was willing to sign any legal document they made me agree to, stating I'd pay them as soon as I went back to work or as soon as the child support payments started coming in. But they weren't ready to budge and told me I could either pay them right then or leave. I tried to plead with them, but nothing worked. Eventually, I had to pack my bags and move in with a friend of mine. She was kind enough to let me live with her, even though she herself isn't that rich. I promised her I wouldn't be in her hair for long, but she told me it didn't matter and made sure I was comfortable. She took really great care of me, even more than my parents did while I was living with them. I'm very grateful for my friend because, had it not been for her, I probably would have been in big trouble. Now that the child support payments are coming in, I can afford to split the rent and contribute. Once I'm fit enough to go back to work, I'll be looking for a place of my own too. I was very upset about what my parents did because it wasn't as if either of them were poor and couldn't afford to let me live with them for a while without paying rent. My dad's a banker, and my mom works in a marketing agency, so they definitely didn't lack anything financially. They were just being selfish and kind of miserly, which is why I didn't speak to them after they kicked me out. They did try to talk to me normally even after I'd left, but I didn't respond to their calls, and neither did I reply to their texts. I just didn't have anything to say to them, and I really didn't know what they had to say to me after what had happened, so we didn't have any contact. The arrival of my son has been a beacon of joy in a life marked by struggle, a light that pierces through the shadows of my past. I've shared glimpses of this new chapter online, careful never to reveal his face, but enough to let the world know I'm a mother now. The outpouring of love from relatives has been overwhelming, congratulations flooding my inbox, and last week, a cousin even stopped by to meet my little one. She posted a photo of our visit on social media, a simple moment of connection that, unbeknownst to me, would unravel a storm. My parents, who saw the post, reached out, their message laced with a casual curiosity: "Are you finally having visitors over?" I let the text sit unanswered, a silent rebellion against the pain they'd caused me. But they didn't stop there. Calls followed, one after another, relentless until I finally picked up. Their voices, sharp and demanding, pressed for an explanation. Why was I shutting them out? I didn't hold back. The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered, as I reminded them of the cruelty they'd shown when they forced me out of their home. I was heavily pregnant, struggling to keep my head above water, and they demanded rent I couldn't pay. It wasn't just about money, it was a betrayal, a calculated move to humiliate me for daring to choose a career path they disapproved of. I had contributed what little I could to their household, but it was never enough for them. They dismissed my efforts, claiming that as an adult, I should understand their need for fairness. Then, as if the past were a trivial footnote, they urged me to move on, insisting they deserved to meet their grandson. The audacity of it stung, a wound reopened from years of being cast aside, first at 16 when my sister orchestrated my exile, and now again when they expected forgiveness without accountability. Their demand to see my son pushed me over the edge. I told them, with a clarity born of years of suppressed anger, that I was an adult now, free to make my own choices. I chose to protect my peace, to keep them at a distance because their actions had left scars that hadn't faded. I ended the call, my heart pounding, but their texts kept coming, accusing me of overreacting, minimizing their betrayal as no big deal. Each message was a dagger, twisting in the wounds of my childhood, a childhood where I was the unwanted twin, relegated to a corner of my sister's room, blamed for my stepbrother's cruelty, and discarded when I was no longer convenient. Their insistence that I move on felt like a demand to erase my pain, to pretend their actions hadn't shaped the person I'd become. But I wasn't ready to let go of that hurt, not when it still burned so fiercely. The argument spilled over into texts, a back and forth that grew more heated with each exchange. They accused me of being irrational, saying they'd talk to me when I was less crazy. That word, crazy, ignited something in me. I was done with their gaslighting, their refusal to acknowledge the pain they'd caused. In a moment of fury, I turned to social media, pouring my heart into a post that laid bare their hypocrisy. I wrote about how they'd always disapproved of my career choices, how they'd misled me into believing I could stay with them without rent, only to demand payment when I was vulnerable, pregnant, and unable to comply. I described how they'd kicked me out, not out of necessity, but to punish me, to assert control over a life they'd never supported. It felt cathartic, a release of years of pent-up resentment. But then, in a moment of reckless anger, I tagged their coworkers in the post, wanting the world to see their true colors. I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions, just as I had. The post was up for only 3 hours before I took it down, but the damage was done. A few people saw it, some even liked it, but the fallout was swift. My relatives, once warm with congratulations, turned against me, insisting I owed my parents an apology. They called my actions petty, saying I'd dragged their coworkers into a private family matter. My friends, on the other hand, saw it differently. They pointed out that my parents had pushed me to the brink, dismissing my pain and labeling me as unstable when I stood up for myself. To them, my post was a justified response to years of manipulation, a way to reclaim my voice. But even their support couldn't quiet the unease settling in my chest. The silence from my parents was louder than any argument. I'd expected anger, a confrontation, something to match the fire of my own emotions. Instead, their quiet felt like a void, leaving me to wrestle with my actions alone. I don't regret the post itself, it was a truth I'd held inside for too long. But tagging their coworkers? That was a step too far. Those people had no stake in our family's dysfunction, and pulling them into it likely embarrassed my parents in ways I hadn't intended. The awkwardness they must have faced at work gnaws at me, a reminder that my anger, however justified, spilled over onto innocent bystanders. I'm torn, caught between the validation of my friends and the disapproval of my relatives. Part of me wants to stand firm, to hold on to the boundaries I've set, to protect my son and myself from the toxicity that defined my childhood. But another part wonders if I've let my pain cloud my judgment, if I've become the kind of person who lashes out instead of heals. This isn't the first time I've faced this crossroads. At 16, when my sister convinced our parents to kick me out, I learned to survive on my own, living in a tent and piecing together a life from nothing. At 16, when my stepbrother's cruelty escalated, leaving me feeling unsafe in my own home, I learned that my family wouldn't protect me. My mother's accusations, blaming me for his actions, taught me that their love was conditional, reserved for those who fit their narrative. Now, as a mother myself, I'm determined to give my son the security I never had. But the question lingers, does that mean cutting my parents out entirely, or finding a way to address this without letting my anger define me? I'm lost in this fog of emotions, unsure of what's right. My relatives' calls for an apology feel like pressure to sweep the past under the rug, to pretend their actions didn't leave lasting scars. My friends' support validates my pain, but it doesn't erase the nagging guilt over involving others in my outburst. I posted on Reddit, hoping for clarity, for perspectives that might help me navigate this mess. Was I wrong to tag my parents' co-workers, to air our family's dirty laundry in such a public way? I don't feel guilty for speaking my truth, but I do feel bad for dragging others into it. The silence from my parents is a weight I can't shake, and I'm left wondering if I should reach out, apologize for that one misstep, or stand my ground and let the distance between us grow. I'm blank, caught in a tug-of-war between my past and the future I want for my son, and I need help figuring out what to do next. I ended up apologizing to my parents, not for the post in general but for tagging their coworkers in it. There was no need for me to do that, and I did it only out of spite, which was unfair. I sent them that text yesterday, but they still haven't replied to it yet. The only link I have with the rest of my family right now, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, is the cousin who came to visit me last week. He's the only person still talking to me because everybody else is just way too angry. He told me that the only thing people are talking about in my family text thread is that post, and they've been talking about it for days now, which seems a little unfair because I took that post down within hours of putting it up. This isn't even about them, this is between me and my parents, so I don't understand why they have so many opinions about it. I was going to apologize to the rest of my family, but I don't think they deserve it or need it because I didn't say anything bad about them. The people I did mess with, I apologized to, and now it's up to my parents if they want to forgive me or not. My relatives have nothing to do with this, so they need to keep their mouths shut. My cousin has sent me a couple of screenshots of whatever discussions have been going on about me in the family group, and all I can say is that I'm really glad he's on my side because the things being said about me are really awful. Honestly, it all speaks more about their characters than mine. They've made really nasty comments about me being a single mother, and there's also been a lot of speculation about why exactly my ex left me. Let me just say that none of the theories have anything good to say about me. All they want to talk about is how I must have driven the guy away and how it's all my fault that my son will be growing up without a father because apparently, I'm so difficult to be with. They pity my parents for ever having to deal with someone like me. It's all just a lot of rubbish, and they're obviously only gossiping about me because they have nothing better to do with their lives. It's sad because I was actually pretty close with these people growing up. We were a close-knit family that would get together at least 3 times a month. These people watched me grow up, and now these are the very same people making nasty comments about me just because of one post where I dared to speak my truth. It doesn't seem fair at all. What's worse is that my parents are a part of this text thread. They don't see anything wrong with what the others are saying about me, and not one of them has tried to defend me or take accountability. It's not even as if they're inactive. While they don't defend me or say anything bad about me, they do occasionally send laughing emojis and stuff whenever someone makes a horrible joke at my expense. It's just really nasty business, and I'm super disappointed in everyone. It's been 4 days since I apologized to my parents for that post. A couple of hours ago, they finally texted me back, only to tell me that they were not surprised I'd taken things so far and said I was a disappointment to them anyway, so they didn't care about the post. I thought that was kind of harsh, especially after I apologized to them and did the right thing. Just like they said to me, I expected the same from them too, so I'm not surprised either. I didn't want them to get away with believing I'd apologized for just making that post, so after that reply, I specified that I was only sorry for tagging their coworkers in it and not for anything else because they definitely deserve to be called out for everything. I saw them typing for quite a while, but a text never came. Instead, they called me. My dad spoke to me. He told me that he and my mother were extremely disappointed in my behavior, especially because I talked about them trying to humiliate me for my career choices. According to him, that hadn't been their intention at all, and it was unfair of me to post about it and make them look bad. They told me that, in the aftermath of that post, there had been a lot of gossip about them at their respective workplaces, and it was very embarrassing for them. My mother had even been targeted by a couple of her coworkers and had been reprimanded by her boss, and it was very insulting. I told them that I did apologize for that, and I also took that post down within a couple of hours of posting it. I can't exactly go back in time and undo what I did, so they have to make their peace with what happened. Also, they'd been very unkind to me when I was pregnant, but I'd made my peace with that and let them go. It was they who tried to reach out to me afterward because they wanted to see their grandson, even though they were the ones who caused me so much stress and suffering while I was pregnant by forcing me to move out. Then they tried to pass me off as crazy for being mad at them. They'd never apologized for any of it, even though, according to me, What they did to me was worse than what I did to them, so they should really count themselves lucky that they even received an apology. That didn't go down well with my dad, and he said he could have filed a defamation lawsuit against me if he wanted to, but he forgave me because I was his only daughter, and I should be grateful for it. I told him I was indeed grateful, and I just expected him to be the same way because, even though I had apologized to him and my mother, they treated me like a second-class citizen after I became an adult. In the past, when I first told them I didn't want to go to college and instead wanted to learn photography, we had a lot of fights over it. They used to say a lot of horrible things to me, including things like wishing I was never even born and that they hoped I got lost and never came back. I hadn't mentioned those things in my post. If I had, then they probably wouldn't have anybody on their side right now, or so I think. They should be grateful to me for not exposing them entirely. After that, the conversation just became too difficult to continue because my dad was screaming at me. If he wasn't even willing to talk, then I didn't see any reason for me to continue bickering with him, so I hung up and blocked him. I don't know if they're going to try to get back in touch with me or not, but if they do, I'm not going to hold back. I'm assuming they've given up on me entirely, and it's a huge relief because I'm already pretty stressed out. I don't need more of it. I did ask my cousin if they'd been talking about me in the group, and he told me that they have indeed been a lot more active after that phone call. My relatives had moved on from that post and the topic of me and my ex-boyfriend, but now it's my parents who keep bringing it back up, only so they can talk badly about me. I guess I'm their favorite topic of discussion now, and even while they're not talking to me, they definitely are talking about me, so I'm constantly on their mind. It's just a pity that it's not for any good reason. I find it so incredible that, even when they were the ones who kicked out a pregnant woman, their own daughter, they still found a way to portray themselves as the victims. They were the ones who kept pushing me and gaslighting me, and when I finally snapped and made some stupid little post, it suddenly became a huge deal, and they are now the victims forever. It's all very frustrating and ridiculous, but I know there's nothing I can do about it, so I just have to suck it up and let them go on trash talking me because, at the end of the day, they're doing it behind my back since they don't have the guts to say any of it to my face. My cousin is on my side, and I have great friends. I'm also hoping to go back to work in a couple of days to get my life back on track, so I'm not going to worry about any of these irrelevant people and only focus on myself. I finally started working again today, and due to some weird miracle, today was the day my parents chose to come visit me at my friend's place. My friend was at work, and I had dropped my son off at another friend's place for a couple of hours since I was at work, so there was nobody at home. I don't check my phone unless it's an emergency while I'm working, so I didn't even realize my parents were waiting outside her apartment. They kept texting me, my mom, since my dad's blocked, for almost an hour before they finally decided to leave. I only discovered it after I was done with my work, and it was time for me to go back home. All the texts were about how this was super insulting for them because they were visiting to see their grandson for the first time, and I didn't even have the courtesy to be at home to receive them. They said that not only was I a terrible daughter, but I was also a terrible mother for taking my son with me to work, which is what they assumed I did. The texts were all very entitled and bipolar because, in one text, they were telling me I was a horrible human being, and in the very next one, they were talking about how desperate they were to see me and their grandson and that it was unfair that I was depriving them of that opportunity. I cannot even begin to understand why they'd expect me to let them visit me or meet my son after everything they'd said to me and about me behind my back. I'm honestly just glad I wasn't at home. I regret even telling them where I was going when I first left. I really shouldn't have done that, but I wasn't thinking straight at the time. Now, this is just more of a reason for me to move out as quickly as I can. I'm going to miss my friend, but I don't want to bother her any longer, and I know that if my parents are aware of where I'm living, they'll definitely try to come visit me again, and I certainly don't want to create any trouble for my friend. Hi, guys. I moved into my own apartment last week. Yeah, it finally happened, and I'm really thankful for everything I have. My friend was pretty sad to watch me go, but she understood. I can't say she'll miss any of my son's midnight crying sessions. My own place is a lot smaller, but this is all I can afford right now, and I know that as I continue to work, I'll get back to where I was in no time. I blocked both my parents on every platform possible after they tried to visit me because I didn't want them around. They haven't tried to get in touch with me directly again after that, and I have my fingers crossed that they won't be able to find out where I am. I changed my phone number, and I told my friend that if my parents ever show up at her apartment, she definitely doesn't need to open the door. If they try to bother her, she's free to call the cops. I'm just hoping it doesn't come to that. Now it's just me and my son, and we're definitely going to make it big. I'm just so sure of it.